you ever noticed that all plants are green? Even the pinkest flower has green leaves, or the dandelions that you blow and send seeds everywhere still have a green stem. Ever wonder why that is?
Living plants grow and thrive all around us, but how are they thriving? Where's their food?
Well, plants aren't green by mistake. In fact, it's photosynthesis that is letting them appear green. Chlorophyll is a pigment. What happens is the light is absorbed into the leaf, and certain light is reflected back. The light that's reflected back is a shade of green. All the other light is actually used inside of the leaf for during photosynthesis to produce the energy that it's going to need to make glucose.
As mentioned, photosynthesis is the process of using light to create glucose in plants and most autotrophs, but there are several steps. First, typically there needs to be water or other minerals that grow up from the roots, either from rainfall or from groundwater. In addition to water, the leaves in the plant also need carbon dioxide or CO2, which is taken in from the air. However, oxygen is released as a byproduct for both H2O and CO2. The final part of photosynthesis is the actual creation of energy or glucose, which is sugar and food for plants.
As you could guess, there's actually way more than just 3 steps into photosynthesis. There's actually 2 phases, light-dependent reaction, which we'll be focusing on today, and something called the Calvin cycle. You'll notice the ingredients for the light-dependent are H2O and sunlight. Another important observation between the light-dependent reaction and the Calvin cycle are that some of the ingredients are needed for both reactions and are exchanged between them. For example, in the middle you'll see a black box with ADP, a phosphate group, and NADP+, and a red with ATP and NADPH. Alright, so as mentioned, we're covering the light-dependent reaction. That's the reaction of photosynthesis that requires light. So our system here, brought to you by Pearson, shows the entire chloroplast, the stroma on the outside and the thylakoid on the inside. Now as light hits this first photosystem, you'll see that the electrons become excited. Now at the same time, hydrogen and oxygen, or water, are brought up to this first photosystem, and the water is what releases the electrons as the oxygen leaves as a byproduct, and the hydrogens will stay inside the thylakoid to be used later. Now the electrons will continue moving down something called the electron transport chain, which has many purposes, but one is for active transport to be used to pump in hydrogen ions across the thylakoid membrane and into the thylakoid space, which again is the space below. Now as the electron transport chain continues, we'll begin to enter photosystem 1. Now at this point, the electrons need to be re-energized at photosystem 1, so light will come in again until these electrons are excited and move on to eventually meet up with something called NADP+. Now what NADP+ is basically a carrier for high energy electrons. High energy electrons you can think of like hot potatoes. You can't just pick them up and carry them. However, the high energy electrons are needed elsewhere in the cell and for the Calvin cycle, which is our next part of photosynthesis. So when the high energy electrons meet up with NADP, they produce NADPH. You'll see a hydrogen also bonds with each NADP to make NADPH along with the electrons. Our last step is the ATP synthase. Now you'll see this figure at the end, which almost looks like an 8 or a guitar. And you'll also notice inside the thylakoid is a high concentration of these hydrogen ions. These hydrogen ions want to be on the outside where the stroma is due to just the high concentration, so they will be able to passively move through the ATP synthase. As they move through, the ATP synthase will rotate and be able to release the energy to convert ADP to ATP. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've learned a little bit about the light-dependent reaction of photosynthesis. Now every time you wonder why it's green, you'll know.